Good evening. You are tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. Ships owned by an Israeli shipping company will not be allowed to dock in Malaysia with immediate effect. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim also said that ships bound for Israel or those flying its flag will also be banned from loading cargo in Malaysian ports.
In a statement, Anwar said the government decided to bar Zim Integrated Shipping Services Limited in response to Israel's continued violence against Palestinians. The Transport Ministry would take immediate action to impose a permanent prohibition on the company. He added that the ban revoked all previous cabinet decisions, which granted permission for Zim's ships to dock in Malaysia since 2002. Anwar also said the government was confident that the move would not affect Malaysia's trade.
37-year-old Muhammad Safiq Rosli was ordered to enter trial for the charge of repeatedly stalking and harassing a female photographer, despite him changing his plea to guilty last week. Magistrate Sasha Dayana Sabtu rejected his guilty plea and ordered a full trial instead after a hospital report found that the accused was mentally unstable.
Sasha said the court cannot accept Safiq's guilty plea after taking into consideration a psychiatric report by Hospital Bahagia Ulu Kinta Perak. She fixed January 17 for the one-day trial when she will also deliver her sentencing. 3 prosecution witnesses will be called to testify, including the victim. Safiq pleaded guilty last Friday and was supposed to be sentenced on Tuesday. He was the first to be charged with stalking in Malaysia on August 10th under Section 507A of the Penal Code. The new anti-stalking law, which came into force on May 31st, criminalizes stalking whether in person or online. The law can be applied if there is more than one incident of following or tracking physically or online, communicating or attempting to communicate, loitering around the place of business or home of a person, giving or sending anything through any medium to a person. However, it must be coupled with the intention of causing or knowing to cause distress, fear, or alarm to the person's safety. Those convicted can be sentenced to jail for a maximum of 3 years, a fine, or both.
The National Disaster Management Agency NADMA has ordered the state and district disaster management committees to be activated following warnings of continuous rain in several areas last night. In a notice issued earlier today, NADMA urged the agencies to increase their level of readiness for possible disasters, especially in high-risk areas.
MAD Malaysia informed that an alert level for continuous rain is expected to occur in Rompin Pahang and some areas in Johor, namely Kluang, Mersing, Kulai, Kota Tinggi and Johor Bahru until tomorrow. Continuous rain has also been forecasted in Kelantan, Terengganu and several areas in Pahang, namely Jerantut, Kuantan and Pekan until December 25th. Earlier, Terengganu authorities have already warned residents there, especially those staying along the coastal areas, to be prepared for the possibility of a third wave of floods between December 22nd and 26th.
Workers in the film sector, including freelancers, will soon receive Social Security Organisation or SOCSO protection that will also include pension benefits. Communications Minister Fahmi Fadzil said he has ordered the National Film Development Corporation Malaysia, FINAS, to discuss with Perkeso on the immediate implementation of the protection scheme. Separately, Fahmi also urged FINAS to prioritise 4 aspects, namely script writing, the pitching processes, marketing and distribution to ensure local films are of quality. Fahmi said amendments to the FINAS Act 244 and the National Film Policy are currently being updated and strengthened with the aim of making the national film industry competitive and globally recognised. He stressed how the production of local films with diverse cultural, ethnic and tourism content also has the potential to generate domestic investments. COP28 drew its curtains last week, ending more than a week of talks with global leaders and environmentalists on ways to address the climate crisis. In attendance was Mogesh Sababati from UNICEF, who shared with us what Malaysians youth aspire when it comes to tackling climate change and building a more sustainable future.
At UNICEF Malaysia, we've hosted several engagements, including the last Youth Aspirations to Action Dialogue that was organized just a few weeks before COP28 in collaboration with the EU delegation to Malaysia and supported by Amanah Lestari Alam, where we invited youth advocates from all around the country to gather their perspectives and insights on climate action. What else is needed? Have we been doing enough? And we also gathered some of their recommendations for the policy and decision makers. And what we could see is that, they have expressed the urgency for a just transition to renewable energy. They want it to be done faster. Establishing local funding mechanism for youth groups to implement environmental initiatives, to be supporting grassroots level movements as well, addressing the long-term need for quality education and the need for support for youth climate advocates who represent their communities to engage more directly with decision makers at various levels. And these messages, these recommendations were then compiled into a youth aspirations document, and then it was handed over to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability at the Malaysian Pavilion at COP28 during the Multi-Level Action Day of the 9th of December.
Beyond COP28, Mogesh hopes for more inclusive climate policies in Malaysia that cater to youth and children's needs. He also urged for more youth representation in the climate policy-making process and better educational programs on climate risk preparedness and mitigation.
As for what we would like to see now after COP28 is that Malaysia to remain committed, and that Malaysia's climate policies and plans also need to incorporate more of children and youth needs and perspectives, including in the National Adaptation Plan, the Nationally Determined Contributions, the NDCs. The reason being is, we want to make sure that we want to mainstream child sensitivity to ensure that climate policies, legislations and initiatives are child sensitive and include targeted commitments for children and young people in various sectors, including health, water and disaster risk reduction. And we also want to see more youth representation in decision-making at decision-making level, where we want to encourage more and more youth dialogues and involve young people in decision-making processes to ensure that their perspectives and their views and opinions and ideas are considered and incorporated into climate policies, like I said earlier. We're also looking at disaster preparedness programs in schools to make sure that we can strengthen disaster preparedness programs in among children and young people to become more resilient to climate-related risk. And this comes along with climate education as well, to enhance their knowledge, the children and young people to be aware of what's actually happening around them, and to also focus on topics including climate resilience, mitigation and adaptation, and how young people can play a part in helping with the government to making sure that they can also contribute as much as they can within their capacity to also help to reduce the impacts of climate change.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay tuned for more. Welcome back. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh has arrived in Cairo today to hold talks with Egyptian officials on a possible ceasefire after Israel said it was willing to agree to another pause in exchange for more hostages. Israel's leaders are facing growing pressure to secure the release of 129 hostages they said are being held in Gaza. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said his country was ready for another humanitarian pause and additional humanitarian aid in order to enable the release of hostages. Separately, the UN Security Council was set to vote again on a resolution calling for a pause in the conflict after two previous votes were delayed as members wrangled over wording. Nearly 20,000 people are now reported to have been killed and more than 52,000 injured in Gaza since the start of the war. The Houthi rebels in Yemen said they will not stop attacking ships in the Red Sea, despite the U.S. announcing a new maritime protection force to counter them. The suspension of shipping operations in the region is having a major impact on global trade and security. Companies are scrambling to reroute their shipments to avoid disruption, while global shipping rates have risen sharply as a result.
Many ships now take the long route around Africa instead of cutting through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal accounts for about 12% of the world's shipping traffic. The United States announced a multinational task force to protect commercial traffic through the Red Sea. The Iranian-backed Houthi group has attacked a number of ships in recent weeks, saying it is targeting Red Sea vessels with links to Israel in protest at its military offensive in Gaza. This week, the attacks began to take a toll on global trade, with shipping rates rising. According to CNBC, shippers have already diverted some $35 billion in cargo from the Red Sea. The attacks have also increased the cost of insuring and transporting goods through the Red Sea, with some companies already warning of possible delays in shipping.
The death toll from an earthquake in northwest China has risen to 131, with nearly 1,000 people injured. A total of 78 people have been found alive in the epicenter of Gansu province, where rescue operations are wrapping up amid sub-zero temperatures. 16 people remain missing in neighboring Qinghai province to the south of Gansu. Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered thousands of firefighters, soldiers, police and medical personnel to the region, one of China's poorest and most diverse. Authorities said they would focus on treating the injured and helping those who had lost their homes. More than 200,000 homes were destroyed and nearly 15,000 collapsed in the earthquake, affecting hundreds of thousands of residents. Many are still too afraid to return home because of aftershocks. Instead, they huddle around open fires. Thailand will stick to an agreed plan to raise the average daily minimum wage by 2.37%, which raises the pay threshold range to 330 baht to 370 baht effective January. Now, this comes despite concerns from Prime Minister Seta Thavisin that the minimum wage, which ranges between 44 to 49 ringgit per day, was insufficient. The current minimum wage in Thailand is 328 to 354 baht, varying between different parts of the country. A senior government official said the wage hike is based on current economic data and is considered equal and fair. However, Prime Minister Seta had previously said the 2.37% wage hike was too low and wage increases would not be a disaster for business owners. His ruling Pheu party suggested to raise the threshold to 400 baht, but faced opposition from businesses worried about pushing up operating costs during a weak economy. In October 2022, the previous government increased the minimum wage by 5.02%. In a historic decision, the Colorado Supreme Court has ruled that former U.S. President Donald Trump cannot run for president in the state next year. It ruled that Trump was not an eligible candidate due to his role in the January 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, spurred by his supporters.
Trump was ordered to be removed from the state's presidential primary ballot. It is the first ever use of Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment to disqualify a presidential candidate. The ruling only applies to Colorado's Republican primary on March 5th, but it could affect Trump's status in the state for the general election later in November. It will also not come into effect until January 4th next year, pending an appeal from Trump's campaign. Regardless of Trump's fate in the state, non-partisan U.S. election forecasters have rated Colorado as safely Democratic, meaning President Joe Biden is likely to continue carrying the state.
That wraps up AWANI Tonight. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching and good night.